The smartest people don't always stand in the spotlight. They don't crave validation, nor do they rush to prove their brilliance. In fact, the higher a person's intelligence, the more likely they are to drift away from the center of society. They observe the noise, the chaos, and the repetition of shallow ideas, and they quietly step back. Not out of arrogance or cynicism, but because they see something deeper, that society rewards conformity far more than thought. And so they disappear, not physically, but psychologically. They move inward into their own minds, where ideas can breathe freely. Carl Jung once wrote that, "The more powerful and original a mind, the more it will incline toward solitude." He understood that deep thought cannot coexist with constant noise. The world today is loud, not just audibly, but mentally. Every moment demands attention. Every platform rewards reaction, not reflection. For the highly intelligent, this becomes unbearable. Their mind needs silence the way lungs need oxygen. When society won't give it, they seek it in isolation. Their disappearance isn't an escape, it's self-preservation. Intelligent people don't vanish because they dislike others. They withdraw because they're overstimulated. Psychologists call it cognitive fatigue. The brain of a deep thinker processes the world at greater depth, noticing layers of meaning in words, behavior, and emotion that others miss. Conversations that seem simple on the surface become complex systems to them, filled with signals and contradictions. Over time, this constant analysis becomes draining. So they begin to minimize exposure to superficial environments. They crave quiet, not out of snobbery, but necessity. Society, however, misunderstands this withdrawal. It calls them antisocial, distant, or strange. But Jung would say they are simply individuating, detaching from the collective to develop an authentic sense of self. The collective mind thrives on imitation. It rewards agreement, repetition, and performance. But the intelligent mind values truth more than acceptance. It refuses to surrender individuality to groupthink. That refusal is not rebellion, it's integrity. Yet in a world built on consensus, integrity looks like isolation. The modern world is not designed for introspection. Its architecture, digital, social, economic, runs on distraction. Constant updates, conversations, and opinions create a rhythm that punishes depth. Every moment is a performance, every thought a potential post. Thinking deeply requires privacy, and privacy has become rare. So those who need it most, the reflective, the sensitive, the wise, begin to disappear from public life. They retreat from platforms that reward noise and migrate toward spaces that honor silence. But this disappearance doesn't always begin with choice. For many intelligent people, it starts with disillusionment. They spend years trying to contribute, to teach, to share, to explain, only to find their insights drowned out by noise or distorted by ego. The world doesn't value truth as much as validation. The thinker realizes this slowly, painfully. They start to see that arguments aren't about understanding, but about winning. That people don't want depth, they want certainty. And when they recognize that, they stop trying to convince. They conserve energy. They choose silence over shouting. Jung described this phase as withdrawal into the unconscious, a natural part of psychological development. The mind, overwhelmed by external nonsense, turns inward to realign with meaning. This is not depression, though it may look like it. It's incubation. The thinker disappears because creation requires it. Ideas grow in darkness, not daylight. And when they return, if they ever do, they bring back something the world has forgotten. Wisdom. There's also an emotional reason why the brightest often step away. High intelligence often pairs with high sensitivity. Psychologists call this emotional intensity, the ability to feel experiences at greater depth. These individuals notice not only patterns of thought, but waves of emotion in every room they enter. They pick up tension, dishonesty, fear, and insecurity almost instantly. They feel the pain of others as if it were their own. Over time, this empathy becomes overwhelming. Society's endless stimulation, Its conflict, its judgment, its hypocrisy becomes toxic. So they retreat into smaller circles, fewer people, and quieter lives. What looks like detachment is often deep compassion that has reached its limit. Jung believed that sensitivity is the doorway to individuation, the soul's attempt to reconcile its opposites. But when the sensitive mind lacks peace, it burns itself out trying to fix the world. The smartest people often learn the hard way that not every problem can be solved through reason or empathy, so they protect their energy. They step away to preserve their clarity, not to abandon humanity. Another reason the intelligent disappear is because society often rewards the wrong kind of intelligence. It glorifies productivity, not insight. It celebrates the visible, not the profound. The thinker who wants truth more than status becomes invisible, because the collective can't measure depth. Jung called this the tragedy of consciousness, that those who see too much are often rejected by those who see too little. The brightest minds feel like strangers in their own culture. Their values don't align with the collective script, and so they drift away to create their own rhythm, their own understanding, their own inner world. Modern psychology calls this the loneliness of differentiation. To think independently is to separate from the herd. At first, it feels liberating, the thrill of awareness, but later it turns heavy. Because the more you see, the harder it is to belong. You begin to notice how conversations recycle the same narratives, how institutions repeat the same mistakes, how culture celebrates illusion over truth. You can't unsee it. And once you see it, it becomes harder to participate without losing authenticity. So you disappear, not out of bitterness, but coherence. Jung wrote extensively about the outsider archetype, the individual who cannot conform because he sees beyond the group's illusions. The outsider isn't a rebel for rebellion's sake. He's a mirror showing the group what it avoids. But mirrors make people uncomfortable. The group projects its own insecurity onto the thinker, labeling them arrogant or strange. That projection isolates them further, confirming the cycle. The intelligent learn to protect themselves by withdrawing before the projection begins. Their disappearance is both armor and freedom. Interestingly, many of these people don't vanish into emptiness. They build smaller, richer worlds. They read, write, create, study, or observe quietly. They become self-contained universes, invisible to the public but overflowing with inner life. Jung believed that when the external world fails to nurture the soul, the psyche compensates by expanding the inner one. Solitude becomes sacred space. In solitude, the thinker reconnects with intuition, imagination, and meaning. They may disappear from society, but they become more present within themselves. However, not all disappearances are healthy. Sometimes the mind retreats too far. Jung warned of inflation, when isolation feeds superiority or disconnection. The line between solitude and alienation is thin. Healthy solitude recharges the mind. Unhealthy isolation starves it. The difference lies in purpose. The wise disappear to renew perspective, not to escape responsibility. They step back to see more clearly, not to reject the world entirely. True intelligence knows when to re-engage, even if briefly, to share what was learned in silence. Still, the cycle repeats throughout history. The greatest thinkers, philosophers, scientists, artists, all vanished at some point. They withdrew to think without interference. Thoreau left for the woods. Jung built his tower in Bollingen. Nietzsche wrote alone in the mountains. Einstein walked for hours in silence, thinking. Every major leap in understanding came from people who stepped away long enough to hear something original. Society often mocks their retreat, then later calls them geniuses. The disappearance, it seems, is part of the process. At a deeper level, intelligence naturally moves towards simplicity. The more a person understands, the less they need to prove. They lose interest in argument, drama, and noise. They prefer quiet because quiet reveals truth. The philosopher Lao Tzu said, "He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know." Jung would agree. As the mind matures, it stops chasing approval. It stops trying to fix the collective's illusions. It becomes content observing quietly from the edge. This detachment isn't apathy, it's wisdom realizing its limits. Paradoxically, disappearing can make these individuals more connected than ever. Away from the crowd, they begin to sense life more directly, not through ideology, but through presence. They notice patterns in nature, symbols in dreams, synchronicities in daily life. Jung called this the language of the unconscious. In solitude, the unconscious becomes audible. The disappearance becomes transformation. What once looked like retreat becomes rebirth. So why does society fear or resent these people? Because their absence exposes something uncomfortable: dependence. The collective depends on thinkers, even as it neglects them. It borrows their discoveries, their art, their ideas, yet rarely understands the cost of producing them. Society consumes their output but ignores their process, and when they vanish, it feels like betrayal. The truth is, they don't owe their energy to a system that drains them. Their duty is to truth itself. This vanishing act, though misunderstood, teaches an essential psychological truth. Every human mind, not just the genius, needs moments of disappearance. We all need solitude to reclaim authenticity. The smartest simply feel this need more acutely. Their disappearance is just a more visible form of what every soul quietly craves: the chance to pause, reflect, and realign. The tragedy is that modern life leaves little room for this. The thinker's withdrawal is a reminder of what we've lost: the ability to be alone without fear. If you ever feel the urge to disappear, don't mistake it for weakness. Sometimes the soul withdraws because it's tired of playing roles. Jung said that to become whole, one must reconcile with the inner self, and that can't happen under constant distraction. The desire to step away is the psyche's way of saying, return home. Not to a physical place, but to your own depth. When you answer that call, you join a lineage of minds who stepped back to move forward. Eventually, many of these intelligent souls return, changed, quiet, and clear-eyed. They no longer seek approval or argument. They re-enter life with balance, able to engage without being consumed. They speak less but say more. They teach not through theory, but through presence. Society may never understand their journey, but it benefits from it nonetheless. Every innovation, every philosophy, every piece of art that reshapes culture comes from someone who once disappeared to think. So the next time you notice someone who has withdrawn, someone reading alone, declining invitations, or moving slower than the rest, don't assume detachment. It may be depth. It may be wisdom reorganizing itself. In a world addicted to exposure, disappearing is an act of rebellion, a refusal to let noise replace thought. The brightest minds vanish, not because they've given up on humanity, but because they still believe in truth. And truth, as Jung said, is not for all men, but only for those who seek it. The smartest people disappear because they've seen what most never notice. That the crowd rarely thinks, it repeats. That attention isn't wisdom, and that noise isn't knowledge. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's refinement. They leave the stage not because they're done, but because they've moved to a higher level of seeing. Society may forget them, but history never does. Because in every age, it's the quiet ones, the ones who disappeared, who end up changing everything.